Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome back to Prime Life. Up next, we are joined by Ronald Abvajee, who is our wellness expert, and we will be talking about 16 days of activism for no violence against women and children. And now we will be discussing, the crucial 16 days of activism campaign, also focusing on eliminating violence against women and children. Ronald will also be sharing insights on how fostering wellness and supportive environment can also contribute to this vital cause. Thank you so much for joining us, Ronald, and welcome to Prime Life.
Always a pleasure. Great to be with you.
Thank you so much. Now, can you please tell us how can wellness initiatives support survivors of gender-based violence? Because a lot of times when we talk about wellness and health, we speak about like illnesses, diseases, and how you can be, good internally and externally. But I don't think we cover enough the fact that also people that are affected by gender-based violence also fall under that criteria.
When you look at gender-based violence, many of us, especially during this period of 16 days, we focus on it as being a physical abuse, a physical action. So from grabbing, slapping, hitting, raping, and a lot of the time death of women and children from their partners and or male partners and males in society. But gender-based violence doesn't start with a punch. It starts with a pattern. And it's a pattern of isolation, a pattern of silence, it's a pattern of financial withholding, it's a pattern of restricting your friends, it's a pattern of so much. And when we start to look at the patterns and wellness support for gender-based violence, we need to look at it in 4 buckets. Bucket 1 is the victim, the person being abused, and mentally, emotionally, physically, financially, in every possible way. That is not acceptable because you are eroding the mental well-being of that person, which is what wellness aims to support. And often we look at wellness initiatives as being reactive. So when you've experienced abuse or being a victim of abuse or survivor of abuse, then you need some counseling and wellness treatment. Whereas what if we flip that around to not relive the trauma in conversation, because it's held in your body, it's held in the in the suppressed areas of the mind, but rather look at it as micro-agency opportunities of claiming back and finding connection rather than just talking about it. Secondly, the second bucket are, of course, the abusers. And that's a bucket where there's something that's not right. I mean, the scary statistic, and this comes from Stats SA's Crime Against Women report, that speaks to 50% of South African women will experience gender-based violence in their lives. And do you know that less than 20% of that reports it? Which means perpetrators are getting away with it. It's almost condoned, or it's impunity around it. So there's something that needs to happen from a wellness perspective to address what the perpetrators are dealing with or not dealing with, to curb and stop this. Then you look at it from a children perspective. You are creating trauma from a young age that will be exasperated as that child gets older. And finally, for others that may be in the family circle, friend circle, or even in society that observe it but are also impacted by it. So the 4 buckets are critical, and wellness, I believe, needs to step its game up. Wellness support and programs in not just being there when you need help, which is critically important, but also in the proactive side of it and building micro-agency around addressing these 4 buckets.
I mean, those are very important facts that you've mentioned. And in terms of the high statistics that you've mentioned, do you think that government has anything to do with that, or do you think our government is doing enough? Because, like, why is it that in South Africa the stats are so high? I'm not saying globally that's not the issue, but I want us to tackle what's happening now in Zanzibar. Like, why is it that the numbers are so high? Do you think our government is a contributing factor? Is it our society? Is it the community? What is happening?
It's all. So let's look at it from a government perspective. So government can control this to a better degree with breaking that impunity badge, that you will be held accountable, you will be if you are found guilty. So every touch point of the policing system and the legal system, and of course the prison system, needs to be so efficient that it's not a delay in dealing, and you must prove that you have been raped or abused. You must prove it. I do not believe that government fully understands that legislation is critically important. The Madlanga Commission and those kinds of issues are critically important. But without looking after the mothers and the future of our nation in women and children, we will not have a future to Madlanga Commission. We will not have that. And fundamentally is that as a woman who's been physically abused and there's physical trauma and they go to a hospital or they go to a police station, they need to go under investigation to document everything. They need to go under and do rape kits. Rape kits. You have just been violated in the most disgusting and traumatic way possible. And now you must still be exposed with pictures, swabs, prods, prudes, looks, potential judgment. So at every touch point, yes, government needs to step up its game, tie its shoelaces and sharpen its sword. G20 was fantastic, but so what? If it's not felt by ICASI into the urban areas where abuse and violence against women and children is rife, and it's not rife from those that we think are scabangas and scabadash. It's rife in those that we have business meetings with, in men that provide for their homes, in men that sit there and when they walk into their homes, the children first observe a mood before they decide to talk, where the energy of your home is one of happiness when you're not there. That is not a home, that's a house that's filled with trauma. And we need to intervene on that. Society, absolutely. Science has shown that in communities that have neighborhood watches that are efficient and proactive and visible, and community policing forums, that there's a 40% decrease in gender-based violence. Why? Because gender-based violence thrives in silence and behind closed doors. And when the community policing forum is active and engaged, neighbors are comfortable and safe to speak, so it gets amplified, so there's no longer silence or hiding. Finally, we're looking at community. And that's where we have patriarchal societies and patriarchal thinking that is still absolutely apt and relevant. Men are the providers, women must be in the kitchen. Women must do as I say because I'm a man. How about as a man you provide safety rather than instruction? How about as a man you provide love instead of breaking? Just because you've been taught that way doesn't mean it is the way. So fundamentally, we need to flip the entire script. And I believe that the awareness campaigns across government, communities, and society is not working. It's making advertisers richer. And the voices, when we had the campaign recently and the woman that stood ferociously against the cause, that pushed government to make the decision that they made about it being a national disaster, I commend them in its highest form, But fundamentally, I believe that awareness is doing minimal because the rates are increasing. We need to shift into micro actions. And you know where those micro actions start as a community? And not just look at government only. It starts by us not liking or watching or engaging in sexist or abuse type content on social media. And let me ask men and women, when you're scrolling over your media, do you like, laugh, or share those kinds of videos? Recently, I noticed something, it's a skit where a woman does something, comes and hits a guy goes, gets dressed as a woman, comes out and pretends to hit the woman. And we're like, ha ha ha, let's like and share. You are perpetuating gender-based violence. How about teaching our young boys about what respect is and communication is? How about we flip the script and start going on emotional training rather than counseling, and teach about emotional and power dynamics? These are the things that we need to do, and that's in our control as communities. So yes, government plays a role, but so do we.
Most definitely. And I want us to touch on something that you said in the beginning regarding like rape kits and stuff. And it's coming from a place of like during the whole call for the stopping of GBV against women and children, there's a group or a large number of men that feel like they're also violated equally and not enough is said about it. We have made gender-based violence about women and children and also not about the male that have been affected by it, right? And with regards to the rape kits, what ways would you think is safe for government to tell if the whole thing is real? Because I must say this, I'm not coming from a place of lack of empathy, but there are also men that are violated or lied about in such cases. So how do we balance that? Because if we don't also mitigate that or make sure that there's a system that's in place that favors both parties, we also risk not having males who are not necessarily contributing anything to the whole, gender-based violence talk because they feel like they're also being violated and nobody's talking about them.
Absolutely. And let me just share with you also, it's like breast cancer.
Yeah.
Breast cancer is being positioned as a woman's disease. But you and I spoke about it, and then we shared that it's also a men's disease because men have breasts as well. It's not as common and as prevalent,
Yeah.
but it impacts a lot of men as well. And men realize when it's too late, and when it's too late, it metastasizes. So the death rate is very high amongst men with breast cancer. Same principle applies to gender-based violence, and you're right. And then to level up what you've said, one is you mentioned that women play victim sometimes. They, whatever the emotions are around that, it's pointing the fingers. I'm going to show you. When abuse hasn't occurred, that happens in instances. We also know that there's men that are also abused. There are men that have been abused. There are men that have been killed by their partners and by women. We know that there are boy children, and children are not male or female that we look at from that basis. We look at it that young boys and girls are being abused, raped, violated emotionally and traumatized, etc. The way we do this, I fundamentally believe, is one of dialogue from both for all. Because currently what is happening is that it almost seems like there's two camps. Men must have conversations. You've seen that men conversation campaign recently. And then you look at it like a woman are doing this in their conversation. We're having two different groupings here that are both impacted and both are impacting, that are running parallel streams, and they're not finding a point of convergence. And they're missing each other. So it's doing this. So fundamentally, it's how do we talk to each other, with each other, for each other, so that we can benefit as a society. And when that happens, it's about the principles that apply, and here's where we look at it, from technology and science that becomes available to identify those that are lying, what do you call these things, lie detector tests, these kinds of nuances. But you have to have your processes in play and enhance the processes to address abuse, and then also to create the mechanism to prove that abuse in the context that's very simple, quick, and easy, so that the victim is not seen as not being helped, but also the perpetrator is actually the perpetrator. So to remove the story and base it on fact. And that boils down to making the policing system, the collection, the medical system, and the clinical system in the rape kits, etc., absolutely efficient and absolutely science-based. It takes money, but we do have money around, because if we can do G20, we got money to spend.
That's true, most definitely. And I want us to talk about resources or support systems that are available for victims of gender-based violence. Are they enough? Are they there? If yes, please share.
They're not enough. So fundamentally, we know that there's great foundations. The Tears Foundation, I love them to bits. The founder of the Tears Foundation was a victim of abuse, and she said, I'm going to claim my power back through helping women that are being abused actually navigate the policing system, the legal system in the right way, because the information is not readily available, both from the police and the legal side to, of course, the other emotional support that is needed. SADAG is amazing. So there's some great organizations, and these are non-profit organizations that are there to support. Within the policing systems and the medical systems, we know that the private hospital groups like Netcare has got clinics available in certain hospitals for children and women that have been abused. And that's got a wonderful safe space for them. But is there enough being done from a shelter perspective and a policing and a community forum and a neighborhood watch perspective? No. We need to do more, because we cannot be everywhere. I mean, we look at the suburb that we face here, the suburb that I live in, and if 50% of women are victims of gender-based violence, it scares the living beans out of me. And often it slides by, and it's been almost normalized, so I won't talk about it, I'll just hide it. And that for me is not acceptable. So no, there's not enough support and help. We need more.
Most definitely. And also, what are some actionable steps that we can take during the 16 days of activism?
Well, number one is amplify the voices of credible messages, not just of someone that is deciding to do something because it's the cool thing to do. Gender-based violence is not a cool thing to do, to amplify. It's either going to be robust from a credible source, someone that has been through it, that is sharing the narrative, the organizations, psychologists, well-being experts that are sharing what's happening, so that you amplify the right messages. Second thing that we have to do is create those micro actions I spoke to earlier. One, have conversations with young boys. Start having the conversations. Find the mentors. Find those that are held accountable. Hold your friends and family accountable if you know that they are putting their partners in the space of gender-based violence, mentally, emotionally, physically, etc., and financially. Open your mouth and call it out. Because if we don't call it out with those that we know, how do we expect government to not suddenly call it out? So own that accountability and responsibility. Next thing is stop amplifying the social media messages that promote gender-based violence, abuse, and so forth. Because if we are not canceling it, and we have been known as a nation that can cancel things, if we are not doing that, we are perpetuating and we're not stopping. And finally, it's to really open up the platforms to have hard conversations, and perhaps the action would be is to form the community policing forums with the hard conversations, to bring in the awareness, to remove the silence, and to remove the impunity that are the shields that abusers hide behind.
Most definitely. Thank you so much for sharing that with us, Ronald. But I believe that we do have an insert by Nozuko Majola, who is the technical advisor at Senex Secretariat, and how companies can create a safe culture for GBV survivors. Let's take a look.
Each and every company has to make sure that the survivors of violence or the victims of violence, they've put mechanisms in place to support them. How do they do that? By creating enabling policies, enabling guidelines within the organizations that are understood by everyone. We must not stigmatize gender-based violence. We need to make sure that gender-based violence is with us, and recognizing that gender-based violence is with us is recognizing that it affects our very own people, and so that we need to make sure that our HR policies actually recognizes the gender-based violence as something that is affecting the individuals, and take time, sit with the individuals, educate everyone in the company about gender-based violence, because people expect to see a blue eye on a person to regard that as gender-based violence. And if there's lack of understanding what gender-based violence, you might think that I'm not affected, whereas emotionally and economically I'm affected. That is still gender-based violence. So we need to have a thorough understanding what GBV is all about.
That was a beautiful watch, but unfortunately we have come to the end of the interview with Ronald. But Ronald, before we let you go, are there any final remarks on the topic?
Just because many men wear a suit doesn't mean you are not a perpetrator. Be aware of the impact you have, and try to work on a skill of emotional regulation rather than just focusing on dealing with it through anger. Because when you can regulate emotions, you regulate a power dynamic, and you can actually shift the energy in your home. If we can start changing this in our homes, we can change it in our neighborhoods. Neighborhoods can become our cities can become our country can become our continent can become the world. That's the opportunity we have here.
Thank you so much, Ronald, for your time.
Always a pleasure.
Viewers at home, that was Ronald Abvajee, who's our wellness expert, and we're talking about 16 days of activism for no violence against women and children. I mean, there's a lot that has been said, and I hope this left you educated and very, very, much thinking on the importance of always speaking about GBV, whether it's gender-based violence, not female-based violence, as we were speaking, but the percentages and the factual stats that we have mentioned also, allow us to think more on, the important and pressing issues and what we as communities can do to make sure that we stand up for those who are affected by gender-based violence. But on that note, it's time for us to head over to a quick break. We'll see you right after this.